Love, real love, isn't understood in comfort, it's understood in loss. Sometimes a person doesn't grasp the depth of your presence until they're forced to live without it. They don't understand what love really means when it's right in front of them because comfort blinds awareness. But when you walk away, when your energy, your care, your laughter, your loyalty are no longer there, they start to feel the absence like oxygen leaving the room. That's when the lesson begins. That's when love stops being a feeling and becomes a realization. Because here's the truth, your leaving is not just an ending, it's a revelation. It shows what love was, what it wasn't, and what it could have been if it had been honored. When you step away, you're not punishing anyone. You're teaching the kind of lesson that presence never could, the lesson of value, appreciation, and awareness. Comfort blinds awareness. That's the quiet truth about human nature. When something feels certain, we stop seeing it clearly. When someone is always there, always showing up, always forgiving, their presence starts to blend into the background of our lives. We start assuming they'll always be there tomorrow, that their love is endless, that their patience has no limit. It's not because we're cruel, it's because we get comfortable, and comfort is the silent killer of appreciation. When love becomes predictable, people forget it's a choice. They stop noticing the small things, the way you check in, the way you make them feel safe, the way you soften their hard days with your understanding. Those gestures that used to feel magical become normal. Your effort turns invisible because it's consistent. You give, and in return, they grow numb to the beauty of what you bring. They stop saying thank you, and not because they don't care, but because comfort has dulled their vision. They start to see your love as a constant, not a contribution. But the truth about comfort is that it doesn't last forever. One day, you reach a point where you realize that love isn't meant to be one-sided, that your giving shouldn't come at the expense of your peace. And when that day comes, when you finally pull back, when you finally choose yourself, that's when the blindness breaks. That's when they start to see everything they once overlooked. Because absence sharpens the senses in ways presence never could. The first time they reach out and you're not there, something shifts. The silence feels different. The energy in the room changes. They start noticing things they'd never paid attention to before. The quiet without your laughter, the space without your warmth, the emptiness where your care used to be. Suddenly, what they took for granted feels like oxygen that's been cut off. That's when reality hits. That's when they understand that your love was never guaranteed. It was a gift they stopped appreciating, and for you, that's the moment of awakening too. Because you start to see that you weren't being unappreciated by accident. You were being taken for granted because you made it too easy for them not to notice. You loved so consistently that they mistook your devotion for permanence. But you learned something powerful. Your love doesn't lose value just because someone else failed to see it. Their blindness doesn't define your worth. It simply reveals their limits. Comfort blinds awareness, but distance restores it. The space you create by leaving gives both hearts the clarity they couldn't find in the noise of routine. They begin to replay the moments they once dismissed, to remember the way you always showed up without being asked, to feel the weight of your absence in the places they once ignored your presence. They realized too late that the love they treated as ordinary was anything but. But here's where the lesson deepens. It's not your job to stay just to remind someone of your value. Sometimes walking away is the only way for the truth to be seen. Because when you remove your energy, your consistency, your care, it forces them to confront what they lost. It teaches them that love is not a given, it's earned, nurtured, respected, and in that realization, they finally understand that what they called comfort was actually a privilege. So when you leave, don't see it as abandonment, see it as revelation. Your absence will become the light that exposes everything your presence once concealed. They'll finally understand what love really meant, but by then, you'll already have learned what you were always meant to know. Comfort may blind awareness, but awareness restores your power. And that's when real love, starting with yourself, begins again. Your presence was never a guarantee, it was a choice. Every day you stayed, you chose love. Every time you forgave, you chose patience. Every moment you showed up when it would have been easier to walk away, you made a decision to honor connection over convenience. But here's the truth that most people never grasp until it's too late. Love is not a constant, it's a commitment. It's not owed it's offered, and when someone forgets that, when they start treating your presence as permanent, they stop seeing the effort behind your staying. We often make the mistake of believing that love will always be there because it has been there. We assume that the person who loves us will always keep choosing us, but love doesn't survive on assumption. It survives on attention. It needs to be seen, nurtured, valued. When someone starts to treat your loyalty as a given, when they stop noticing how much of yourself you pour into them, that's when the relationship begins to fade, not because the love disappeared, but because it was taken for granted. You see, your presence carried weight, emotional, spiritual, and energetic. It brought balance, safety, and meaning. But when someone stops recognizing that, your presence starts to feel like background noise to them, not because it lost power, but because they stopped listening. That's what happens when people forget that presence is a gift. It's like sunlight, warm life, giving and constant, until one day it's gone and they realize how cold the world feels without it. When you finally take your love away, that's when they see it for what it was. Every moment they ignored, every act of care they dismissed, every effort they overlooked becomes crystal clear. Your absence teaches what your presence could not, that love was never guaranteed. It had to be respected to continue. The comfort they once felt turns into confusion. The security they once leaned on turns into emptiness. They start to remember the softness in your voice, the calm in your presence, the peace in your energy, and they realize those weren't random traits. They were choices you made every single day to stay connected, even when you weren't being met halfway. But the most powerful part of this realization isn't about them, it's about you. When you decide to step back, when you withdraw your presence from a space that stopped valuing it, you reclaim your power. You start to see that your love was never meant to be spent on convincing someone of your worth. You were not placed here to teach someone how to appreciate what they already had. You were meant to share your presence with those who understand its value from the start. That's where your healing begins. Because as much as your absence teaches them, it frees you. You begin to breathe differently. You start to feel lighter. The energy that once went into holding everything together is now flowing back to you, and you realize that love was never supposed to feel like begging to be seen. Love is meant to be mutual recognition. Your presence was a blessing, and your absence is the proof. One day, they'll look back and understand that you were not replaceable, that what you brought was not something anyone else could give in the same way. They'll realize that your presence was a privilege they treated like a possession. But by then, your heart will have already moved on to a place where it's respected, not just received, because your presence was never guaranteed, it was sacred. And when someone loses access to it, they finally learn the truth. Love isn't about who stays the longest, it's about who shows up with gratitude for the chance to stay at all. Absence forces reflection in ways that presence never can. When you're there, your love becomes a part of their daily rhythm. The laughter, the care, the constant support, all blending into the background of their lives. But the moment you walk away, the rhythm breaks. The silence grows louder, the world feels emptier. It's in that stillness that reflection begins, because absence holds up a mirror that presence never could. When you leave, they are left alone with their thoughts. No more reassurances, no more comforting words, no more presence to hide behind. Suddenly, the noise of everyday life fades and what's left is quiet. And in that quiet, truth speaks. They start to replay the moments they brushed aside. The times you reached out, the conversations they dismissed, the effort they ignored. It's strange how memory sharpens when the person who inspired it is gone. Every overlooked moment starts to glow with significance. Every word they took for granted starts to echo. Absence has a way of making people confront what they avoided when things were comfortable. When you were around, they didn't have to think about what your love meant. They could just feel it effortlessly, consistently. But now, your absence forces them to think. It forces them to analyze what they had, what they lost, and why it mattered. They start realizing how much of their peace came from you, how much of their balance was because of you, how much of their emotional safety depended on your energy. That's when awareness begins. But reflection doesn't just happen for them, it happens for you too. When you walk away, you start to see things more clearly as well. You start recognizing the ways you overextended yourself, the moments you silenced your needs, the times you gave too much and asked for too little. Absence gives you clarity that presence never could, because distance brings perspective. You're no longer tangled in emotion. You can finally see the truth for what it is. This reflection is where the healing begins. It's where you understand that love isn't just about being there for someone, it's about being met there too. You realize that you were carrying the emotional weight of two people, and that's why you felt so heavy. When you step back, you begin to breathe differently. You learn that love without balance isn't love itself, sacrifice. And as that awareness settles, something powerful happens. You begin to reclaim yourself. For them, the reflection is painful. It's the sting of realizing they misjudged what mattered most. They start seeing how your laughter used to brighten the room, how your care softened their edges, how your belief in them gave them strength. What they once labeled as ordinary now feels irreplaceable. They'll try to fill that void, but nothing will feel the same. Because it's not just your presence they miss, it's the version of themselves that only existed when they were loved by you. Absence doesn't destroy love, it reveals it. It strips away ego, pride, and distraction, leaving only truth. It shows what was real and what was merely comfortable, and while that truth might hurt, it's necessary. Because sometimes love can only be understood in reflection, not in real time. So if you've had to walk away, don't see it as the end of a story. See it as the beginning of understanding for both of you. Because your absence is not emptiness, it's enlightenment. It's the pause that reveals the meaning behind every word, every gesture, every sacrifice. And when the reflection is over, only two truths remain: what they learned from losing you and what you gained from letting go. Pain is the greatest teacher, and heartbreak is its most unforgettable lesson. When someone loses you, it doesn't just hurt. It dismantles their sense of security, their illusion of control, their belief that love will always wait for them to grow. That kind of pain shakes the soul. It strips away pride, defenses, and the ego's false sense of certainty. And in that raw emptiness, something remarkable happens. Awareness is born, because pain, as brutal as it feels, is not punishment, it's transformation. When you were there, they could ignore the lessons love was trying to teach them. They could tune out the quiet warnings, the emotional imbalances, the moments when you pulled away in silence because you were tired of giving so much. But when you're gone, when the comfort of your presence disappears, they can't escape the truth anymore. Pain makes them look inward. It forces them to sit with what they lost and why they lost it, and that's when real growth begins. You see, pain doesn't just remind someone of what they had, it reveals what they failed to become. It shows them how selfishness, neglect, or complacency poisoned what was once beautiful. It teaches them that love isn't sustained by convenience, but by care. And in that heartbreak, they start to understand that love was never about possession. It was about presence, effort, and respect. The very things they overlooked when they thought you'd never leave. This pain will keep them awake at night. It will visit them in quiet moments, when they scroll through old photos or pass by a place that still carries your laughter in its air. They'll try to distract themselves, to move on quickly, to fill the void with noise or new faces, but nothing will fit. Because love isn't something you can replace, it's something you can only grow into, and that growth doesn't happen until pain breaks the shell of ignorance wide open. For you, too, pain becomes a teacher. It teaches you not to settle for almost love, not to keep shrinking yourself just to stay close to someone who can't see your worth. It teaches you boundaries, self-respect, and patience with your own healing. You start to realize that pain is not the end of your story. It's the chapter where you start to evolve. The same pain that shattered you becomes the fire that refines you. You become stronger, wiser, more grounded. You stop chasing validation and start embodying value. And while they struggle with regret, you rise in renewal. Their pain is about loss. Yours is about rebirth. That's the difference between those who learn too late and those who finally choose themselves. They'll look back and see the moments they should have held on tighter, the times they should have listened instead of argued, appreciated instead of assumed. That regret will echo in their heart, not to punish them, but to teach them the very thing they couldn't grasp when you were near. Love requires presence, not promises. Pain transforms perception. It turns arrogance into awareness, carelessness into gratitude, absence into realization. And though it hurts, deeply, relentlessly, it's the kind of hurt that leaves wisdom in its place, because love, in its truest form, isn't fully understood until it's been lost. Only then do people realize that the heart doesn't break to end love, it breaks to reveal its truth. So when you think about the pain, yours or theirs, remember this: pain is not the enemy, it's the mirror. It reflects what was real, what went wrong, and what must change. And once that lesson is learned, neither of you will ever look at love the same way again. Regret is a haunting companion. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It visits late at night when the distractions fade and the heart finally sits in silence. It's in those quiet moments that the truth hits hardest. What once seemed ordinary was actually extraordinary, and what was once taken for granted now feels irreplaceable. When he loses you, regret becomes his teacher. It walks beside him, reminding him of the chances he didn't take, the gratitude he didn't show, and the love he didn't fight for. At first, regret feels like confusion. He'll wonder why everything feels so hollow. The coffee doesn't taste the same. The music sounds different. Even the laughter of others feels foreign. He'll scroll through old messages, replay conversations in his mind, and realize how many times you tried to reach him emotionally. How many times you offered peace, connection, and truth while he stayed distant, distracted, or detached. The realization will sting, because regret always arrives after the heart finally understands what the mind ignored. He'll start to see how your love was never dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and healing. It wasn't built on grand gestures or constant validation. It was built on consistency, patience, and understanding. But because it came so naturally, he mistook it for permanence. He believed you'd always be there to forgive, to understand, to stay. Only now does he realize that love, no matter how deep, cannot survive where it's not appreciated, and that realization will stay with him, not for days, but for years. Regret has a unique way of reshaping a person. It humbles them. It strips away the ego that once made them feel invincible. It forces them to look back not with pride, but with longing. They'll remember your laughter, your softness, your strength. They'll remember how your presence made even ordinary days feel sacred, and they'll come to understand something they couldn't before. Love was never about ownership. It was about alignment. You didn't leave because you stopped loving. You left because you stopped being seen. And that, to him, will become the sharpest truth of all. But while regret anchors him in reflection, it liberates you into freedom. You will see that his regret is not your responsibility, it's his reckoning. You've already done your part. You gave, you loved, you stayed until it was clear you could no longer grow in that space. His regret is not a reason to return. It's the confirmation that your leaving had meaning. It shows that you mattered deeply, that your love was real, that your absence was powerful enough to awaken the truth. Regret is not a punishment, it's a consequence. It's life's way of teaching appreciation through loss. And while it may hurt him to realize what he let go, it will heal you to know that you no longer have to carry the burden of being undervalued, because the greatest closure isn't hearing "I miss you" or "I was wrong." It's seeing the impact your absence made and knowing you no longer need validation from it. So let regret do its work in him. Let it teach him what your love tried to show when words no longer could. Because one day, when he finally understands the depth of what he lost, you'll already be standing in the light of your own peace, stronger, wiser, and no longer waiting to be remembered. And that's the most powerful lesson of all. Healing is where the story truly turns, not for him, but for you, because while his lesson comes through loss, yours comes through rediscovery. The moment you leave, you begin a different kind of journey, one that's not about proving your worth, but about remembering it. You start realizing that your love was never the problem. It was your willingness to keep giving it where it wasn't being nourished. Healing teaches you that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the moment your heart decides that peace is more valuable than potential. At first, healing feels uncomfortable. You'll miss the familiarity even if it hurt you. You'll reach for your phone out of habit, you'll hear a song that takes you back, and you'll feel the ache of what once was. But healing isn't about forgetting. It's about rebalancing. It's about shifting the focus from what you lost to what you're gaining. Each day, you start reclaiming pieces of yourself that were buried under someone else's needs. You start sleeping better, breathing deeper, smiling without effort. You begin to realize that your absence didn't just teach him, it taught you what love really means too, because love isn't meant to deplete you. It's not meant to be a constant proving ground or a test of endurance. Love should expand you. It should make you softer, not smaller. When you heal, you begin to understand that real love starts with alignment, not attachment. You start setting boundaries not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You stop chasing clarity from others and start finding it within yourself. And that's when you see the truth. The love you were giving so freely was never wasted. It was training you to love yourself the way you once loved him. Meanwhile, while you're healing, he's learning. He's learning that you can't replace authenticity, that attention is not affection and company is not connection. He's realizing that what you offered wasn't ordinary, it was sacred. But here's the thing, your healing is not about his regret. You're not meant to wait for his realization or hold your breath for his apology. Your healing is about moving forward with grace, trusting that what's meant for you will never need to be begged for or explained. As you grow, you'll start to see love differently. You'll stop romanticizing pain. You'll stop mistaking chaos for passion or silence for peace. You'll start attracting people who meet you where you are, not where it's convenient for them to be. And when that happens, you'll look back, not with resentment, but with gratitude, because losing him wasn't the end of love, it was the beginning of understanding what love truly is. Healing doesn't mean you erase the past, it means you integrate it. You take the lesson, release the pain, and rise wiser because of it. You become the version of yourself that no longer needs to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself, and that's the real victory. Because while he finally understands what love means through your absence, you finally understand what self-love means through your healing. And when those two realizations meet, the pain of his awakening and the peace of your evolution, that's when the universe whispers its final truth. It took losing you for him to understand love, but it took leaving him for you to become it. When love ends, it doesn't truly disappear, it transforms. It changes shape, moving from presence to memory, from closeness to reflection, from comfort to clarity. The end of a relationship is never just about loss, it's about revelation. It's about both hearts being forced to confront truths they avoided when love felt easy. For him, it's the realization that what he thought would always be there was, in fact, a choice you made every day. For you, it's the awakening that your giving spirit was never meant to be taken for granted. This ending, painful as it may seem, is not destruction, it's redirection. It's love teaching you both what it truly demands: awareness, effort, and gratitude. You see, it takes losing you for him to finally understand what love really means. He learns that love isn't about convenience, it's about presence. It's not about someone being available, it's about someone being engaged. It's about appreciation in the small moments, about choosing to see what's in front of you before it becomes a memory. Your absence becomes the mirror that reflects his mistakes, his pride, and his blindness. It shows him the sacredness of what he overlooked. And as the reality of that loss sinks in, he starts to feel the depth of what he once had and failed to cherish. His pain becomes his teacher, and that pain, the one you never wished upon him, becomes the very thing that transforms him. But your lesson is different. Your path doesn't move backward, it moves inward, because while he learns through regret, you learn through renewal. You start to rebuild yourself piece by piece, not into who you were when you met him, but into someone wiser, steadier, more self-assured. Healing teaches you that love isn't about holding on tighter, it's about knowing when to let go. It's about understanding that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sacred. You begin to see that your softness was never weakness, your patience was never naivety, and your love was never wasted. You were simply loving at a depth he wasn't ready to meet. And that's the beauty of endings. They reveal strength you didn't know you had. You stop chasing closure from someone else because you realize closure was never theirs to give. You stop trying to make sense of the past and start finding purpose in the present. The silence that once felt unbearable becomes the space where your soul finally breathes. You stop waiting for someone to recognize your worth and start living in a way that embodies it. That's where the shift happens, from pain to peace, from longing to liberation. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means reclaiming the parts of yourself that love once demanded you set aside. In the end, his realization and your healing are two sides of the same truth. It took losing you for him to understand what love really means, but it took leaving him for you to become that meaning. He learns that love cannot survive without gratitude, and you learn that love cannot thrive without self-respect. And though your journeys now move in different directions, both are guided by the same light, the truth that real love, pure, conscious, reciprocal love, doesn't chain you, it expands you. So when you walk away, do it not in anger, but in power. Because your absence may teach him what love means, but your evolution will show the world what it looks like. Thank you for being here, not just as a listener, but as someone who chose to feel. Thank you for allowing these words to meet you where your heart needed them most. Because this wasn't just a speech about loss, it was about awakening. It was about rediscovering strength, reclaiming peace, and remembering that love, in its truest form, always begins and ends with self-awareness. Thank you for showing up for yourself today, for daring to look at the parts of love that hurt and still choosing to see the beauty in them. That takes courage. You've faced what many avoid. The truth that sometimes the most powerful act of love is walking away. And in doing so, you didn't lose, you evolved. You didn't break, you became whole. You didn't fail, you found freedom. As we close this moment together, I want you to remember this. Your love was never a mistake, your giving was never wasted, and your leaving was never weakness. You were the lesson, the light, and the proof that love, when genuine, leaves a lasting impact, even in its absence. So, walk forward not with bitterness, but with clarity, not with regret, but with gratitude. Because your story doesn't end in loss, it continues in transformation. Hold your head high, carry your heart gently. Let your silence speak where words once fell short. And most importantly, trust that the love meant for you will never need to be earned. It will recognize you, value you, and stay with you through presence, not promises. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your heart. This isn't goodbye, it's a beginning. Until we meet again, keep loving deeply, healing boldly, and walking forward with grace. Thank you, and goodbye for now.